Everyone in the office, everyone fully remote. Those are manageable. You can do it. Hybrid, you're basically doing both at the same time, and that's really difficult. So you should talk to your people and get really specific about what that means. Do you guys all need to be in the office like one day a week to do certain kinds of meetings and collaborations? Okay. Is this a safety thing? So like you only make people come in like Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday, and then Friday's like optional for whatever. You got to be really clear about this. And it's got to work for your company.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, we were just before we started out, I was sharing how my daughter went from virtual to in-class learning, and her teacher, bless him, he's got a room full of kids, not that many kids, but he's also got a bunch of kids that are still remote, and he's trying to manage 2 sets real time, and it's hard enough just managing 1 set. So as you just mentioned, hybrid is very hard to do, but it seems like it's here to stay. What are the skills that are going to be needed for managers to pull this off?
Yeah, so I really think we're talking about the future of work here, right? So the future for leaders is to stop trying to provide what is equal for everybody, and instead think about providing what is fair for everybody. So what do I mean by that? Equal is we all come in at 9 and we all leave at 5, and we all get a 1-hour lunch break, and we all, there's an equal thing that we all do. Right, we're all expected. Everyone in this job is expected to be in the office, or 3-4 days a week they're in, and on Friday you can, stay at home. That's equal, but that's not fair. Fair is, well, these 2 people, it doesn't really matter. Like they can come in whenever they want. They kind of have a lot of flexibility in their lives, but these 2 people are single parents, and they need to take their kids to school. And I can keep them and they can be great employees if I allow them that flexibility to work slightly different hours and take their kids to school and pick them up, right? And kind of split their day up a little bit differently because they're single parents, right? Or because they have a sick spouse or a sick family member or whatever, right? So what do we do that's fair, that works for our team and works for each employee individually, right? That's the future of work, is to be able to, it's almost like being given a bag of Legos, right? And equal is everyone go make the same little house, the same little car or whatever, right? And fair is everyone take the bag of things and make the best thing you can out of what you got based on what you know how to do, right? Based on the goals of the company or whatever. And how do we have good outcomes out of all those things? Because flexible work is the future, right? For me to be able to say, you know what, this week I've got family in town, so I'm just going to work from 6 p.m. until 11 p.m. And then I'll get up in the morning and I'll do a little bit of work. I'm basically going to get my same amount of hours in, but like in the middle of the day, I got family in the house for a week. I want to be able to hang out with them, right? Instead of me taking the whole week off of work because I have family in town. Is your boss going to be okay with that? Since 2009, I've been telling my people, cool, go for it. Right? If it works, no problem.
Yeah, it really comes down to like getting their work done, the output. And as a consultant, I've seen the insides of lots of organizations and different cultures. And, I'll never forget one in outside of Chicago where people would screw around all day and then work late, and they would try to outstay each other to see who could leave the latest. It was just the weirdest thing. Or another client was to see who could send the most off-hour emails to show that they were busy, doing stuff at 11:30 at night, and it was just mind-boggling to me. So it makes total sense.
And sometimes it's a real cultural thing. I mean, I think in Japan, they tried passing some laws in the last few years, because there was this big cultural thing, like you don't leave until the boss leaves, or you don't leave until super late. And so people were basically coming in by train on Monday, working all week, sleeping only a few hours at night, right? In these little pods, just so they could be the first one back in the morning and stay super late, because it was like a thing. If you didn't do that, you didn't care about your work, you didn't care about your job, you would never get a promotion. And of course, they had super high turnover, super high burnout rates, high suicide rates, right? And so the government tried to step in and create laws to say you can't have these super long hours. People got to go home. They got to, we have to make a better balance here. There had to be actual government intervention into this issue, right? But it can, you see it in organizations all the time, all the time.
Well, I think that's ultimately going to completely restructure the suck up culture in the office. And I think it's going to be the absolute best thing. Cause like, exactly to your point, Joe, like after all these years in tech, the people who got promoted were whoever sucked up the best and had the most face time with the boss. Whereas now with remote work, like to your point, Chris, it's how many emails you send, it's the productivity, it's whatever. And so the guy who's always going to lunch with the boss, having coffee, and is a professional suck up. If you haven't got an email from him in 2 weeks, it's very clear, like the data of who's performing, who's emailing, who's in meetings, and who's not. Right. And that's where I think that the remote work might accidentally end up kind of destroying, and for the best, a lot of those little subcultures and that perpetuate the inequalities and things like that. So like, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, and it can really have a big impact on our diversity and inclusion goals, our ability to have diversity of thought in the organization, right? So I'm looking at the people in my company saying, oh, if they're a salesperson, are they hitting their goals? Are they beating their quota? If they're beating their quota, then why are they beating their quota? How are they being successful? I want to understand that. If they're not, well, then is that because they're not making enough calls, or they're not sending enough emails, or whatever, right? There's always going to be some level of sucking up in human nature and politics, and like there's always going to be some bit of that. But so often, whether it's the subgroup inside of an organization can't get access into that area to be able to get promoted and be seen, or whatever it is, whether that's a minority group or a gender group, or maybe that's just could even be like introverts and extroverts, right? Our introverts just as a group struggle to be seen, and because they're not doing all that stuff to be seen, right? I mean, I literally, as a card-carrying extrovert, can walk into any situation and get attention in 5 seconds, right? And a lot of my friends that are introverts are like, how do I not get attention in this situation? How do I just disappear and hide? And that's not great for promoting the right people. So you bring up a great point that this can help level the playing field, as long as we are, as a culture, and the senior leadership is focused on output measurement and really thinking about what's important and adding that layer of filtering on there to say, let's promote people who are showing us success, who are doing what we need to do, and not promoting them because they like the sports team I like, they went to the college I went to, right? They go drinking with me on Fridays, all that stupid stuff.
Yeah, they're louder.
I think that this might even accidentally, like 10 years down the road, we might look back at this and go, oh, this was the big catalyst for us no longer selling our hours as being productivity, but more so just output. Because as of right now, output is always associated with how many hours are in the office, what you're doing. Are you there 9 to 5 online? Can I see the little green dot? Are you online? And so I think this could be a great thing, and that like it'll force us to shift our mentality to, okay, well, as long as everything's done, if you're doing it from 6 to 11 because you've got family in town, like, sure, whatever you want to do.
And, and part of the reason that I wanted the book to get out there, and we wrote this and really wanted to talk about it, was there's a little part of me that has a fear about what's about to happen. And I'll explain. So, if you think back to World War II, all the men went off and went over to Europe or over to in the Pacific, and were fighting in this war, right? And women came out of the house in huge numbers and worked in factories, worked in very important jobs across the country, right? Because there was a huge labor shortage that had typically been taken by men. But then the war ended and they all came back. And what did they do? They pushed women back into, so even though they proved they could do the jobs, they could do them just as well, they were excellent parts of the workforce and the economy, we all wanted to run, not say we, but back then they wanted to run back to what it was before, right? And it took another 20 to 25 years for there to be another sort of real push and revolution for women to say, we want our equal rights. We want to be able to work in the workplace. We want to be able to be a mother if we want to be, and be an employee if we want to be, right? And so even though there was this giant catalyst moment that proved this and showed it, it still went back in reverse and then took another 20, 25 years to come back to be prominent again. And there's a part of me just looking at history that's a little afraid that could happen right now with remote work, that, we'll try to shove it back into normal, and then some people will get the benefits, but it'll be years until they really go, oh, this really is better.
We don't really have to look at the data, or you don't have to look at history, look at the data. Like, of all the people that lost jobs, like the majority of them were women, unfortunately. So now that they've had to leave the workforce to care for kids and stuff like that, like even with remote work, there's still the perception that like you're not doing enough and things like that. So on that, like with respect to that, what kind of attitude changes, training, management, soft skills do you foresee being really necessary in order to make sure that we're able to really capture this moment and move it forward in a really productive way?
So if you think about if your management or leadership style right now, what came from a traditional workplace, think of yourself as the cowboy riding the horse, okay? And suddenly someone shows up and has a car. It's not the best car yet, and all the roads haven't been built, but like it's a car, and it's a lot better than riding a horse around all the time, right? And do you try to think about the future of work, and do you try to figure out what you're supposed to do by trying to how do I put a saddle on this car, right? Or how do I do all these? I mean, you have to like really change the way you think. There's a whole new way of dealing with transportation in this example with this car than a horse. That doesn't mean horses aren't good. A lot of people like to ride horses and they're fun, but they're no longer the main mode of transportation, right? Because we found a better way to do it. I mean, another example would be, do I want to carry around 14 different devices, or am I just going to carry around my iPhone or my smartphone, right? So there's a progression, and we are in that moment of progression. And so what are those things that you need to do? I talked about it a moment ago. You need to be flexible and fair with your people and not try to put them in a box where everything is equal and the same for everyone. Those days are gone. If you want to keep people, you need to be fair and not equal. Equal under the law, there's some things there, but like fair in how we're going to figure out how they're going to be your employee. You're going to have to really get better at emotional intelligence. You're going to have to figure out, so how do I in this setting, how could I possibly know if one of you two was struggling right now? If I didn't see you walk into the room, right? You all popped up on the screen, but I didn't see you walk in the room. I didn't observe your body language. I didn't see how you acted. So now that we're remote, how do I figure out if you're struggling, or maybe you're really happy? Is there something going on? How does the leader pick up on that? So we have a lot about that in the book. I can give you one sort of a kind of cool exercise that every leader can do if they want to immediately get better emotional intelligence. I actually learned this. Joe and I are in an ABL group, a CEO's group, and I learned this from Lisa Perrine. I think you've met her. And I put this in the book, and it's called bonding. So any meeting you have that's 30 minutes or more, when you show up, ask everyone to go around the room and answer this question. How are you showing up? Very simply, how are you showing up? Go around the room and you will hear, I'm doing great, things are cool. Oh, I just got a puppy. I haven't slept in 3 days. I just found out my grandmother passed away. I mean, you're going to get a whole wide range of answers. And as a leader, you can go, oh, Sally has been struggling the last couple of days, and now she's telling me she hasn't been sleeping very well. There's an issue here, right? I know I need to give her more time, more patience. Maybe I need to talk to her offline, try to see what we can do to help her out. Right? I can really deal with her emotional, baggage or whatever's going on. If someone says my grandma just died, okay, let's not have this meeting, or let's excuse that person from the meeting. Why are we trying to push through this when they clearly are struggling, right? That's a way for you to really show a lot of empathy, a lot of care and concern. When you leave the meeting, you go around and ask another question, which is, how are you leaving this meeting? Now this is a bit more businessy, a little more employee focused. And did we all have the same meeting I think we just had? If I think that we just had this awesome meeting and everyone's on board and they're ready to go conquer the world, and I'm hearing, I'm confused, I don't get it, this is a bad idea, I'm frustrated. Oh, wow, we need to have a new meeting. We need to come back again. Again, a really great way for you as the leader, not to just, shove things down people's throats and just push and hope to just, push them harder and they're going to somehow make it all happen. And the last little rule on this is that the more senior you are in the group, you need to go last. So if we show up and I'm the CEO and I say that question and I go first and say, I'm having the best day ever. This is so awesome, guys. My book just did great. This is so awesome. And then Sally goes next and her grandma just died. She's going to say, oh, I'm fine. Right? Because she doesn't want to squash the person who has some leadership, power over her. She's just going to go with the flow and shut up and not make any waves. So we go last. Senior leaders go last. And sometimes we don't even go at all if we pick up on that our team is struggling. It's one of the most powerful ways anybody can do this right now, remote, hybrid, or traditional. You can really start to check in with your people, and they'll do it in the beginning. And the more you do it, you'll get better and better, and they'll share more and more, and your team will just gel like you're the, the Michael Jordan Bulls era. You're just this perfect little team that just, always seems to be able to figure it out.
But in a virtual remote world where you're just looking at a tile on a screen, to your point, like EQ, emotional sort of intelligence, you really need to be tuned into people.
Yeah.
My experience, most managers don't even register on that scale.
So the whole time I'm laughing, I'm like, oh my God, there's gonna be so many vacancies in the C-suite soon. Like, holy smokes.
But I just don't think they don't know that, right? I mean, I didn't know to do that. And I feel like I have pretty good emotional, intelligence. I didn't know how to do that. And I learned that from somebody else. And then I went and tried it with my team, and I was like, whoa, oh my gosh, I hadn't realized any of this was going. I didn't realize they were doing this at all. There's a lot of cool things you can do with your team. If you're a new manager, if you suddenly get a new, team together, you can go do Brene Brown's values exercise. You go download, there's like 400 or 500 values she's got on her website. You pass them around and tell everyone to pick 8. What are the 8 values that really represent you as a person, right? As an employee. And then right before you meet, you tell them all to cut it down to 5, right? Because it's hard for people to cut down, but they'll cut down to the last minute. And everyone go around the room, share why these 5 things represent you. Why does this make up who you are? I'm not kidding you. I've had grown ass men crying in meetings. The toughest, exterior, I'm Mr. Machismo, tough guy. I don't show any emotions. And then they're telling us why these values mean to them and how they came to this conclusion. And they're like sobbing. And I'm like, what in the world just happened? So there are tools, there are things out there to really help you connect with your people and go deeper with them than just on that surface level. We're all together in this company trying to sell this widget to these people,
Fascinating. So it sounds like the future of work will all be a lot more sort of simpatico, whether we're remote or on premise, or hybrid.
The future of work on the couch with your therapist. Yeah.
Let's hug it out. Come on. So that's really interesting. I couldn't help but think of when you were talking about the Marine Corps, that scene in The Matrix where I think it was Trinity needed to learn how to fly like a Huey helicopter. And
she's like, oh, she's like, 8416. Yeah. And there's like, yeah.
So
that's the future of work I want, right? I want to just be able to be like, here, you want to know how to play piano? There you go, right? That's what I would sign up tomorrow. If Elon Musk started working on that and he wanted to volunteer, I'd be like, I'm in. I'll do it.
I think he is working on that. Did you see the chimpanzee playing Pong?
Yeah, he's getting there.
Yeah. So Actually, Kirsten, this is one of your questions, if you don't mind. What are some of the intangibles that employers should get ahead of before the post-pandemic new normal, i.e., onboarding remote workers? Like, or and you can extrapolate this if you're starting a new business right now and everybody's remote. And I mean, this goes to culture as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to sort of bake in that, rah rah, this is who we are, this is what we're about, when people have never been face to face. How do you do that?
Yeah, you do it one step at a time. So it's a silly little saying that we've all heard, but how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. So you can't just try to go from A to Z in one step. It's working on things, figuring out what you're good at, figuring out what you're struggling with, and where you might be weak. And I think wherever you're the most weak, wherever you're the biggest issue, go there first and work on that first, right? And just try to get a little bit better all the time. That's how we built over a period of time, over years, of figuring out how to meet better, what to do, letting our teams, if you hear an idea, if you get a new software, try it, right? You don't have to try it across the whole company. You can let one of your teams go try it. Let them try out a certain practice or a certain, there's the Pomodoro effect and egg timers, and there's, how do we meet? Whatever cool little thing that you come up with, be willing to say yes and let a group go experiment and try, and then report back to the group and see how that worked. Mm-hmm. Definitely, you need to start using video to record training sessions, record how people do their job. So it's so much easier to onboard them by being able to give them videos and resources. Anytime we teach somebody something, we always record it, or we'll record it ourselves and then send it to them. And what I find is that people really do better when I've sent them a recording, because they can rewatch it over and over and over. They don't have to feel stupid if they didn't get it the first time. They don't have to feel stupid if they forgot in 2 weeks what I taught them. They can just pull up that video. What was that? Oh, that's how I do it. That's right. And they feel confident. They feel like they can get the answer themselves, right? They're more self-motivated, and they never feel stupid or embarrassed or ashamed that they didn't know, because there's this expectation. If I taught you once and you said you got it, that you got it, right? And then you don't want to come back. So getting really good about that part of onboarding and training is really important. And I think the third part is that companies who are willing to expand the remote workforce and take advantage of being able to hire great people across the country or across the world. I no longer had to compete with the LA and Orange County market here in Southern California for top talent. You want to hire a CMO around here, it's $250,000. I can go to that same great CMO in Kansas for $100,000. Same great education, same awesome person, fits into my culture, great, right? There's a rapidly different pay scale for someone who's in the middle of the country versus on the coast, right? So there's a great advantages. However, you need a good payroll company and you need good resources in dealing with the different tax implications, right, of having employees in different states than where you're at, and a really good strategy with how you're going to implement your employee compliance and laws. We've taken upon ourselves to just apply all of the rules from California, because that tends to be the most stringent, to all of our employees so they get the benefit of whatever the California standards are for pay, for sick time, for everything. We're not giving different people different stuff, but there's different rules in every state. There's different rules in different counties. So if you're going to allow yourself that, get a good payroll company, get a good HR consultant, even a good tax attorney or whatever. Get it right, get it done right the first time, so you don't kind of have some of those stumbling blocks later on.
Well, that's good advice. Yeah, and I would imagine hiring abroad gets even more complicated.
Yeah, it's something we haven't ever gone down that road, because we have enough complexity with 50 states and 3,000 different counties and all of that. So,
are we soon going to be seeing job ads for director of remote work?
Yeah, there's already heads of remote work. There's already, that's a job position in a lot of companies. I think you're certainly going to see an explosion of it. We already saw a big explosion of chief people officer, which I think is awesome. And that sometimes is a little more kind of can fit into that remote stuff too. So the head of HR is very tactical. It's very compliance driven, right? It's take what the senior team decided and go implement it. But a chief people officer is sort of thinking about the vision and the culture. Well, how does our brand look out there so we can recruit great people, and making good decisions on flexible work and those types of things, right, to keep people. So we're seeing good organizations starting to realize they need someone who can think strategically and holistically about our employees, and not just tactically or just strategically, as the seniors, to sort of bring all those things together.
So we have a question here. It's a good question. What will consumer perceptions of business people working from home be like? For example, a law firm where attorneys and staff work from home versus having a law office, and the whole perception of a law firm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're expecting, oak paneled walls in library, well, you have a nice library, but it's my first reaction would be like, why are you charging me $300 an hour? What about the consumer perception of people working?
I mean, listen, I pay my attorney a lot of money, and I've never been to her office in Chicago, so I don't know if she's got wood paneling or an IKEA desk. I mean, I got no idea. I know she does awesome work, and I could care less what that looks like. Now, for some people that may be important. There may be meetings and things that happen. So maybe they keep those offices, or maybe they scale them down, or maybe they have several offices in one place in case they need them for those depositions or special things, right? In that very unique example. But that doesn't mean their people can't work remotely, right? Most of the time or all of the time. If you're a paralegal, if you're there's other positions inside that example that you don't need to be in the office most of the time. For everybody else, honestly, there's going to be so much remote work happening. It's going to be enough at the norm. I mean, right now, we're totally fine. Everyone's been okay with it. I called Microsoft support the other day, and the first thing they said was, I'm working from home. If there's any noises you hear, my apologies. Let me know if there's anything distracting. Like, they already addressed it right up front, and I got the support I needed. It didn't matter, right? That they were sitting in a, I don't know, server farm or on a beanbag in Silicon Valley. They could give me the support that I needed. So I think because people work from home and there's enough empathy there, it's not going to be an issue. We can continue to work remotely or flexibly in most cases. And if you can't, then you're just going to fake it. I mean, for years I had to fake it because it did matter to people when we first went remote. So we always had an office where someone could, if they showed up, there was an office, there was a conference room there. We shared it, but like it looked like we had a space. After no one going there for 6 years or ever showing up unexpectedly, we got rid of it, right? Because it just didn't happen. It just wasn't a thing for us. So it's going to be a little case by case.
Sure.
I was reading a whole bunch of stuff, all this data and everything from McKinsey, and they were saying how employees have been pretty disappointed overall with how the way that their managers have not communicated the vision, not just pandemic related, but overall and future vision and stuff, and how that's so integral to their work quality, feeling included, stuff like that. What would you, in a dream scenario, what kind of communication would you like to see moving forward from managers?
Yeah, I mean, so let's put this in two categories, right? So are we talking about managers, or are we talking about leadership? Because I think this is the frustration people have, is they're saying, my manager's not telling me what's going to happen. Your manager doesn't know what's going to happen because the leaders don't even know what's going to happen yet. I mean, are we really out of the woods yet? Are we really going to go all the way back? I mean, California is about to go back, but India is like literally on fire with COVID. Are we going to have some resurgence that comes back through? Will there be another pandemic? We don't know. I think that's a little bit why companies are willing to allow remote and flexible work for at least another year or two, for sure, because they're not totally confident this isn't going to happen again. We need to be really confident that we're done with this COVID stuff before people make final decisions. Now, in a perfect world, we would say, listen, we're going to continue to support flexible work. We're going to figure it out with you guys through the next year, through the next 2 years, and we won't make any radical changes to that. That would be perfect, right? So at least you had some runway to know, for the next year, I know I'm going to have flexibility here. The next 2 years, flexibility here. but I just don't think they know. And I know employees want it, and it's really crappy that we can't give them better communication. But on the flip side, no one has a crystal ball here. I mean, it's really the only real communication we can give them is to say, we don't know. And we're going to keep trying to do our best to help you and to be flexible and make the right decisions and get your input. But it's pretty hard to ask people to like know exactly what date we're going to go back, and are we going to go back 100%? All of that's a little bit, what is the government going to do? What is this governor going to do versus, and then will some mayor do something different than that governor? I mean, it's really complex. So leaders and managers do as much communicating as you can, and employees, they got to give as much patience as they can.
I'm thinking more in terms of like vision that like, if the company's changed direction because of the pandemic, or if they haven't, in terms of like, not so much just like the logistics of like, I don't know where we'll be working, but more so the sort of blue sky vision with regards to that. Do you have the same answer or no?
Well, I mean, if any company should be communicating their vision, and anytime it changes, on a very consistent and repeated way, right? This would be something that should be talked about in a regular monthly all hands meeting. It should be reiterated and talked about at the team levels, right? So good companies find ways to communicate and repeat several times in a short period of time their vision and where they're going and what's happening and what they know and what they don't know and what they're trying to figure out. So if your company's not already doing that, don't expect them to suddenly get better at that during, the pandemic. But if they were doing that and now they're not, they need to get back into that. So I will say most companies and most people I know are reporting that they are talking to their people more than they ever have. They're having more meetings than they ever had, right? They're sharing what they know more than they ever had. That there sort of was this up in communication because we got slower, because the intensity went up. And so it's going to be coming up here where I think it's going to maybe stumble a little bit. There, people are going to get relaxed. And that's when employees are really going to struggle. But the McKinsey study was really saying they wanted to know what was going to happen, and no one was telling them what was going to happen. And I get that frustration.
Probably varies from industry to industry as well.
And state to state. And right, I mean, what's happening in New York versus what's in California. And can you imagine if you have employees in both states? Can't really give a unified vision if you've got two different groups of people doing two different things. And maybe you got people in Texas and they just took off their mask 3 months ago and said, forget it. Right. I mean, so what do? It's tough. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen performance models evolve amongst any of your case studies? Like it was easier to tell before if people were sitting at their desks, like when we started this conversation, but now they're not there. It's one thing to measure output, but it might, what if someone is constantly, they have higher output, but their work is easier, and other people get the harder, assignments, but it looks like their output is lower. So,
I mean, it's case by case, but I will tell you that when we went remote, we found out a lot of really interesting things. And I'll give you one story that kind of goes to that. We had all of the work in the one general area, right? We were in the one big cubicle farm, and all of the particular work for verifying employment, verifying education was in one area. And it was a group of people that were essentially sharing that work, right? The work came in, needed to get done. They were sharing it, figuring it out. And we thought that this one woman who had worked for us for years was our top performer. She always seemed to get the most verifications done. And we had another young lady who was on the bottom. And we were very close to considering firing her because she just wasn't anywhere near as productive as the other person. We thought maybe we should get somebody else. Well, we went remote, and lo and behold, the work started being sent out more democratically. Because they couldn't just go together and talk about it and figure out who took what work. It now had to be democratically assigned, just randomly assigned to them, right? As the only way to manage it now. We found out that top performer was our worst performer. She had been cherry picking all of the work. All the easy work she would go in and take. And because she was a nice old lady and she brought in baked goods, no one ever complained. No one ever said, don't do that. They didn't like it, but no one ever complained about it. And the woman that was our worst performer was actually our best. She took the hardest work because she took it as a badge of honor, and she thought she was really gonna show us what a great employee she was by doing the hardest work that no one wanted to do. So when we leveled the playing field and made it that work got assigned democratically, right, and randomly, we could clearly see who our top performers are. We got rid of the politics and rid of the cherry picking, and it actually allowed us to be able to evaluate people much cleaner, right? And remove all of the cognitive biases that come along, right? So there's the halo effect. Halo effect is that person did a really good job in that one role. They must be a really good employee all the time, right? We know that's not true. I could take a salesperson and put them in front of QuickBooks and say, now be my bookkeeper. Just because they're a great salesperson doesn't make them a great bookkeeper, right? They're not going to become an accountant. And also people who look good, attractive people who wear nice clothes and, all shave very well or have good, nice haircuts or put on great makeup or whatever, right? We suddenly think that they must be more successful because they look nicer. Those are things that managers are subconsciously being hit with every day in a regular office. When you're broken away from that and your only real evaluation is, I have 5 people and then I can see what their output was, and these 3 people beat my expectations and these 2 didn't. I mean, doesn't matter if they're attractive or they did a good job last week or not. I know these 2 people didn't meet my expectations and I need to go have a conversation with them. So for us, it completely leveled the playing field and removed so much of the bad evaluations. I see people looking busy. I see people in meetings. I hear staplers clicking. I hear paper shuffling. They must be productive. All of that bull crap went out the door. So if organizations can figure out how to put in that proper measurement, it will be an elevated place for them and help them remove some of that bad behavior. It's not bad behavior. It's unconscious bias, right? It's not intentional. Everybody wants to evaluate people correctly, but there's a lot of sort of bad data coming into our brains when we're around people in that kind of setting.
Sure. Is there any concern around or feel like there's a need for surveillance, employee surveillance remote, like when they're working from home to know?
There are some companies that have gone on that road. If anyone is in one of those companies, I would quit today. I think that's like the worst. I'm a big believer on what you focus on grows. So if you're focused on, are they working, and focused on, are they standing in front of their computer for the entire time that I'm paying them to be there, right? What's going to grow is more bad behavior, more cheating, more people trying to figure out how to get around that and game that system, right? And you're spending all of your time and effort focusing on your worst people and not your best people. I think you should focus on what your best people are doing, rewarding them, thinking about how to help them, how to support them, how to get them the best projects and the best work, and de-emphasize those people who aren't performing, and eventually figure out, if need be, how to get rid of them. So in my mind, there are times we all need to be on there. I mean, you got to have enough measurement that people are doing the job that you want them to do. But if that means that they have to be, it makes me think of the Tesla cars the self-driving function won't work unless your hands are on the wheel, right? And so there's people who've been taping water bottles, half full water bottles, to the steering wheel to trick it, to make it think that their hands are on there so they don't have to be holding the steering wheel, right? People will find a way around things. That doesn't mean we got the outcome we wanted.
Sure.
Right? So we really need to think about better ways of making sure we get what we really want, and not this. I just think surveillance and that kind of stuff is it's so misguided.
Yeah, I recall, I mean, this was years ago, reading about a guy who actually automated a lot of his job, and he didn't tell anyone. And he was sitting at his desk all day, but he just pressed a button and the work was done. And the management found it and they let him go. And it just boggled my mind. I'm like, oh my God, that guy needed to be,
Promoted.
transferred to IT and given a job to automate the rest of the business.
Right.
Right. Management. But if in a remote situation, someone could be doing that, and if their job, if their work, sort of lend itself to that, you would probably never know.
I mean, I would guess that that person's job eventually was going to get out, someone was going to figure out how to automate it anyways. And if it wasn't him, it would be a vendor or someone on the outside. But, I mean, this is why you need to have good conversations and be figuring out, you know, who was that person's manager that they didn't know that they weren't doing anything all day. On the flip side, I think about it, like all I care about is that the work is done. Like, honestly, I've told myself, I told my whole company, if you can figure out how to do your job on the golf course and it gets done and our clients are happy and the work is done well, I don't care. I don't care if you want to go live in Antarctica and get it done. As long as you got Wi-Fi, I mean, I don't care. I know what needs to be done. Let's go get it done. Maybe that's naive. Maybe that's just, I'm not a Fortune 500 company that maybe has so much levels of bureaucracy that I'm not dealing with that. So, but for me, I've never had to worry about that.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that would require a very flat organization.
Yeah.
So you start putting those layers of management in the middle, forget about it. Everyone has to justify their existence.
And I think that we're maybe close to removing some of that hierarchy. I think, Agile and Scrum and Kaizen reinforces that idea of removing some of the hierarchy, in the middle management, minutia, right? And, we set up a lot of our meetings intentionally that anyone can call the meeting and you don't have to get permission through someone else's boss to be able to ask to meet with them or to go up. If someone thinks I'm the best person to be on the meeting, they just invite me. They don't have to ask their boss to ask me. And I've seen that in companies. I've had people come in and say, whoa, I don't want my people going directly to you. And I'm like, why? If I'm the right person to talk to them, why wouldn't you want them just to get the answer quickly? You know what I mean? Like, why do you want this bureaucracy in there? On the flip side, we give people permission to be able to say that I don't want to go to this meeting, right? It's okay. Anyone can invite anybody, but I also reserve the right to say no, because either I'm not the right person, I don't have the time, I don't have the bandwidth, right? And so we give a lot of flexibility that way. But I think if we can continue, and I know Zappos was hard at work at this, right? By trying to get rid of titles and get rid of this idea of hierarchy, instead of just getting people together who's the right people to help me get this work done and to create great results. I think that's where we're headed. I don't know if their model was quite there yet. And unfortunately, their founder passed away before they could maybe see that vision all the way through. But I think something like that will I think come forward at some point.
Interesting. Well, and we've got about 6 minutes left. What do you say to, like, this was a few years ago, but it's more than a few years ago when Marissa Mayer was running Yahoo, and she declared that everyone had to be in the office. And then all these other companies see Yahoo do it, so they make that same proclamation.
Yeah.
And so then it's this sheep-like behavior. How do you fight that? Like, how do you?
Well, first, don't take any advice from someone who's running a sinking ship. I mean, I might look to Google for good advice. I'm not looking at Yahoo for good advice. I mean, certainly she wasn't able to do much there and end up, gone. So it's like the guy from WeWork coming out, was it last week, and saying the least motivated people are those that work from home. And then this week, he posted a $2.8 billion loss, right? So maybe don't take advice from people who can't do a good, aren't really leading great, successful organizations right now. I think that would be my first piece of advice. It was pretty clear to me, and Kim had the same idea. Kim Shepard and I had the same sort of thought, which was she was trying to get rid of headcount. She was trying to take care of costs. And I think, this is a personal opinion, I don't have proof, this is just my opinion, by saying there was going to be no more remote work, they cleaned house. A lot of people said, I'm not willing to move and to come back into the office. And they were able to cut a lot of staff without announcing a layoff, right? And so from a perception standpoint, they could reduce staff by 20%, save the money, and not say we're having a layoff. And from a perception standpoint, look like they were still a viable platform. Of course, if you've ever been on a Yahoo page, recently, nothing viable about that, but it looks like AOL back in 1997 still. So, it's just, I don't know. I always turn to the people who I think are killing it, people I think are innovative, people who are being successful. Google has done so much research on so many different things. We put a lot of that in the book, and they share it, right? And they're open and they're transparent and they talk about it, and they're talking about how to make things better. And she, where she was sort of putting down a group of people. Again, where you put your focus, it grows. And so she was sort of negatively put her focus somewhere else. I mean, I hear Google saying, here's how we're going to support people differently in the future, right? They're talking about making these really cool new environments for groups of people to be able to function hybridly, right? And create spaces where they feel safe from a health standpoint. They're not saying we're not going to do remote work or people are not motivated and things like that. They're saying, hey, we're going to help people figure it out and we're going to be great. So I think that's who you should take your advice from.
It's great advice.
If it means the death of performative leadership, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I used to, they're working, I know we've got 3 minutes. I want to be respectful of your time, but I remember working in an office and one of the top paying executives had the same Excel sheet on his desk the day I got there and the day I left. And that was years I was there. And he just performative leadership. And he would always point to this Excel spreadsheet and it had a drop of coffee on it. And it was the same spreadsheet the whole time. And it's like, if that performative leadership can die, go the way of the dodo bird. And I think if remote work can be the stake in the heart, that would be wonderful. So that's a delight. I'm all for that.
And even if companies just want to be super selfish and evil and all of this, right? And they just companies always want more profit, more performance, more productivity. That's always the thing, right? We got to grow. We got to get better. Well, guess what? You got that with remote work. People stopped commuting 2 hours a day each way. They worked more. They have less, the boundaries are suddenly not there, right? They were getting more work done. We saw that in more CRM entries, more calls, more emails. I mean, there's data to show. Now, I don't think that that's sustainable. And I think we really have to help our people create boundaries and have a better work-life balance and all this. But if you're just super evil and all you care about is more productivity, you get it with remote work, right? So there's really an answer both ways. If you care about your people and you want the best for them, I think remote work is that wonderful balance, especially people who have unique working situations. I mean, we hire people with physical disabilities. We hire spouses of military personnel who get moved around all the time, and it's hard for them to find a job. We get like these they're like supercomputers that show up and do this amazing work who couldn't get a job because someone knows that they're going to get going to moved in 3 months. And I'm like, I don't care. Take your laptop with you to the next base and keep working, And so there's the wonderful side. And then there's, if you're just a jerk and you want more out of your people, well, this works too. So I think that it could be a good argument both ways.
Lovely. You want to hold your book up, Chris?
Sure.
Give us a final shout out.
Yeah, remote work. It dropped a couple days ago, I think. And
it dropped yesterday. It dropped Wednesday. We hit #1 hot new release on Amazon. And so go check it out and leave us a review. Let us know how we did. And if anyone needs help or has more questions about remote work, I'm happy to help.
And how can people get hold of you, Chris?
They can go to chrisdyer.com if they're interested in more about me and my work and keynotes and things like that and consulting. If they want to know more about People G2, they can go to peopleg2.com. We do background checks, drug testing. We've been 100% remote since 2009. And on both websites, there's a webinars there. We do free webinars every month and talk about leadership and culture and remote work. You can go back and watch all of our past webinars, and that's a great way to get training to your people and help them get acclimated. Kim and I just did one this week on that, about the book. So I think a couple months ago, we did one on hybrid. So there's lots of free resources there if anyone is interested.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being our guest on our maiden voyage here, our inaugural stream.
Fantastic. And I really appreciate it and love all the work that you do, Joe. And it's great to meet you, Kirsten, as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. It was awesome.
All right.
We'd like to thank our viewers. Next week, we have Johannes Monius, professor from University of Redlands, who's just a brainiac on the economics around automation and the impact on job markets and cities and geographies. And that's going to be a very interesting conversation. So please join us. Same time, same bat time, same bat channel. Okay, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.